And welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to you all on a Friday evening. Whether you're joining us from Guyana, you're joining us from outside of Guyana, welcome. Welcome to Politics 101. Uh, how about you who are joining us from there in Europe? Those of you joining us from Europe, especially those of you in England. Welcome to Politics 101. Those of you joining us from South America, we're talking about our sisters and brothers there in Cayenne, French Guyana. Those of you in Suriname, welcome. Welcome to Politics 101. It continues to be a week full of news. Things are happening all over our region. All over our region. Things are happening there in the United States of America. You see what's happening there in the United States of America. Oh boy, politics are moving so fast. We're living in interesting times, politically and otherwise. Welcome all of you down to Politics 101. There in our Guyana, we've had a couple of cases. You know, we had a court case where a couple of citizens took the EPA to court, and the court ruled in their favor. But as the courts would do sometimes, they would rule in your favor and then not take it to the next level. So we'll talk about what's happening on the oil and gas front with that case and with other issues as it regards to our oil and gas. Last evening, of course, we had Professor Thomas on, and he had that interesting perspective. He made reference to the public auction and suggested that the public auction itself may have played a role in the Venezuelans starting their aggression, saber rattling, and so on. And we were making the point that we have oil, we have the geopolitics of oil, includes Exxon, the United States, Chinese company we have here, we have a European company, British company, and we fail to take into consideration Venezuela. That Venezuela is a big factor whenever we're talking about oil. Very big factor. Because they can use that threat to, do the worst that they can do is to invade our country, bomb the oil fields and so on. But even short of that, they can scare away investors. So whenever we are making policy, Thomas is arguing, whenever we're making policy, we've got to take Venezuela and the Venezuela factor into consideration. So here we are. We're going to talk some oil tonight, and our guest is going to be, as usual, on Friday evening, Dr. Vincent Adams. Dr. Vincent Adams is going to be here with us. So please share the link. Please share the link and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on. It's been quite a week in the wake of that conference in Washington. Well, you know, we've been talking about it all week. Some of us were there. We were there, some of us. And we knew what went on. The government, as you all notice, all kinds of propaganda. You know, we went on an excursion. We were not prepared. The people ask us for evidence. We didn't have evidence. All that stuff, confusing evidence and data, conflating evidence and data. Hakeem Jeffries, minority leader, who met with 2 delegations, not just 1 delegation, 2 delegations. He put out a statement last night. Let's hope that that statement will put to rest a lot of the propaganda that is being spewing from the government. I tell you, welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link. There are all these people that the government apparently is hiring to do propaganda work for them. Some of them, you don't even know their names. They spring up. But you have Randolph Prasad and a young man named Joel Bagwandian. He is their oil and gas economist. The oil and gas economist. And what we said, little bicycle on their brakes. You listen to the young man, and clearly he went to school. You can't take that away from him. But going to school by itself doesn't make you an expert. He was on a program and they asked him to define democracy, and the young man couldn't. One of the things about us as Guyanese people, West Indian people, whenever we go to university, we take there an understanding of the world. So we go to learn, but we also take with us an understanding of the world. Because you see, Guyana was part of the British Empire. And in that sense, we had a kind of empire education in high school and so forth. We were learning about Guyana. Well, we learned less about Guyana and ourselves, but we were learning about far off places like India and New Zealand and Australia and so on, because they were part of this large empire. And so you have to have an understanding of the place, your own country. And what I find with these young people, that the PEPP is pushing out as experts, good that young people are getting into the mix and so on, but they have to understand their own country. We have on our side young people too. Young Elson Lowe, who's going to be here next week. He's a very good young man. He has been here several times. And he's a bright young man. And he's learning as he's going along. He's not arrogant. He doesn't get out of his lane, as you all would say in Guyana, and so on. But you have these guys on the other side who are so arrogant. And the arrogance of this government is something that is getting us into trouble every day. Every day. They feel that they know everything. They know everything. They don't want other opinions on what's going on in the country and the oil and gas industry. Oil and gas are definitive. Everything was before oil and after oil. And as we move forward with the oil and gas industry, we need to get it right. And if we're going to get it right, we have to get it right together. One of the reasons that we didn't get a lot of things right since independence is because one party or the other sought to do it. No one party has the answer to the problems and the challenges of our country. No one party. We also have to be cognizant of the fact that we have different shades of opinion. We are not a monolith. We are also not a monolith ethnically. We have different ethnic groups, and different ethnic groups, based on their own experience, they come at important issues from their own perspective. Indians, given where they're located in the political economy, have a particular expectation of that political economy. So do Amerindians and Africans and Chinese and Portuguese. And if we're going to build the kind of real multi-ethnic, multiracial state that there ought to be, then there must be inclusion beyond the word. It's okay to say, I am multiracial, I am inclusive, I'm one Guyana. It is chat. Where is the one Guyana in this critical period of our history? We can be, this oil can bring us down as a country. The Dutch disease, threat from Venezuela, threats from Exxon and other oil companies, the threat of oil spill, devastation of our environment. Oil can bring us down, and oil can build us up. Oil can bring us down, and oil can build us up. That is how important oil and gas are. We are playing with life and death here. And some would argue life and death, death as in DEBT. So when you open the newspapers and you hear the various perspectives on oil and gas, you're wondering why Guyana is not sitting pretty. But here we have perspectives outside of the decision-making process. We do not have an oil democracy. We are showing signs already of an oil autocracy. An oil autocracy, not an oil democracy. And we are going to be saved with an oil democracy. That is what we are arguing for. So please share the link. Good evening to all of you. Those of you from the Washington, D.C. area, thank you all for having us last week. I made reference to the delegations that were there, and I forgot to mention that the General Secretary of the PNC was there as part of their delegation. My apologies, Young Elson Lowe was there. Dr. Vincent Adams was there, not just in his technical capacity as an expert on oil and gas, and as I mentioned to you all, he did speak on behalf of our group in the second meeting on gas. And nobody asked him, where is the evidence? Of course, he understands American government and how it works. Nobody asked us about no evidence. We were there to give evidence, and we gave evidence. And nobody was in front of a chalkboard telling us, well, now you all have given us evidence, where is the data? There's nobody asking us about that. So this nonsense that the people ask us for evidence that we didn't have, what evidence? Nobody asked us for evidence. Nobody asked us for data. But you see, they want to reduce everything to data. We have data. We have been sharing data on these programs and other programs. Data was shared at the conference. But they want to reduce everything to data. Nigel, you said one village, 23 roads. Other village, 7 roads. What did Jack Dio say? When we are building roads, we don't look at data. So what do they want? You present data, and they say, oh, when we decide making our decision on roads, we don't look at data. Yet data. Dion Abrams went around Buxton and Annandale. He showed the Buxton roads. He showed the Annandale roads. Buxton roads, bumpy, bad condition. Annandale roads, nice. And he goes on a program, and Ravi Dev and company tell him, oh, they got bad roads in Indian villages too. This is the people you are dealing with. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. Let's bring in our guest right away. We had the pleasure of meeting again and last week at the conference. And as usual, when you go to conference, you get a lot of time to chat. And one of the persons that I chatted most with was Vincent Adams. We hadn't caught up in a little while, but let's bring him in.
Hey, good night,
Dr. Adams. Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Hines. I don't think I can add any more thoroughness to your coverage of what actually happened in Washington. In terms of the data, I can tell you, I asked Miss Hughes to send me just the file that she had, and she couldn't even transmit it the way that it was so big in terms of data. So there is data there, and like you said, rightfully said, the legislators listened to us we had a very intensive conversation and discussions with them. They asked questions. So they weren't just listening and not paying attention. They did pay attention, but they didn't ask for any data, So, but we shall see what is forthcoming.
Well, Vince, the response of the government to the conference says something. It says something, and we were there. Tell our audience, for you, what were the greatest accomplishments of that conference?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, lots of compliments goes out to Rickford Burke. I was part of that system in Washington there, and it's not easy to arrange meetings with congressmen and senators, and the way that that Rickford and his team pull it off, it was just amazing with the kind of precision. And let me mention one thing here that the folks need to know, and because I hear, well, they didn't even show up at the conference. It was because they were very busy at this time of the year. I used to go through this cycle of budgets also, and this time is a really busy time where they cannot leave Capitol Hill. But they thought it was so important for them to be engaged and for them to be meeting with us, that since they couldn't make it down to where the conference was, they make certain that we came to where they were. So all this nonsense about them not participating and that type of stuff. But anyway, one of the biggest things the one I think the biggest accomplishment, Dr. Hine, was for us to get an opportunity, not only meeting with the congressional set of folks, which is very important for us to transmit the information firsthand to them, but for us as Guyanese to come together and show that or to share the concerns with people who probably didn't have all of the details. Guyanese who are in the diaspora and folks even in Guyana who traveled all the way to the United States to share that type of information and to have discussions as to how, what should be the path forward. And it wasn't about Dr. Hines, this was not political. Wasn't political discussions. It was how do we plot a course forward for the real one Guyana, the real one Guyana, not the mythical one Guyana. So there wasn't anything about PNC and PPP. It was mostly about what is best for a united one Guyana. And, so I think that was the biggest accomplishment, to get all the parties together and to generate that interest. And of course, that big accomplishment, I think, Dr. Hines, ironic as it might sound, was the attention that the opposition brought to this conference, was the attention which made people even more determined to get there. But it has brought attention. It has even, caused the government to be in a tizzy. Here's a guy that they ridicule and call him a criminal and everything else. But the guy has been setting the agenda for them in the past few weeks. He was the one who caused them to urgently hurry up to Washington, spend millions of dollars to head up to Washington with their entourage to meet with the congressional delegations. Where's the data that they presented? I would like to see their data that they presented to the congressional delegation. So I'm glad. I think that's one of the biggest accomplishments, with the attention that the vice president and the government has brought to this conference, which is now going to be annual. And it has given us a big impetus an encouragement to move forward, because it's obvious that they view it as being very important. Or else, if they thought that there wasn't anything there, why would they have been so interested and concerned and worried to be spreading all kinds of propaganda? So I think that, and this is just the start, Dr. Hines. This is just the start.
Well put by Dr. Vincent Adams. They called us unpatriotic. The office of the Prime Minister, on the night of the conference, put out a statement saying these bunch of Guyanese are unpatriotic because we went and we met with representatives of one branch of American government. Vincent and I were in the room, and in one of the two meetings. Yep. Vincent and I were in one of those meetings, and Vince would remember me saying to the congressman and Sister Yvette that we do not come here for regime change.
Yep.
We did not come here to ask you to meddle in Guyana affairs. We were clear about that, because I anticipate that they were going to go there and call us unpatriotic. The fact of the matter is that America is involved in Guyana with a multi-billion-dollar investment by American company. America has geopolitical interests in Guyana. That's a reality. Many of us would wish that no outside influence was there, but that is a fact. So it's not an accident that we didn't go to Australia, we didn't go to South Africa, we didn't go to New Zealand. They don't have any interest in Guyana. We went to the United States because they have interest there. And we didn't go complaining. We didn't go hiding in the night, begging them to overthrow the government. We went there in open daylight, making our case to a branch of government that is not directly involved in Guyana, because it's a State Department. The ambassador represents the State Department. And so the State Department is generally very informed, because they would get reports from the embassy and so on. But the other branch of government is not necessarily informed. You remember, Brother Vince, when we drew to Hakeem Jeffrey's attention that the ambassador has promised American mediation between the two sides and rejected by the government, Hakeem perked up, because he did not necessarily have that information. And we were able to, in a sense, give them a broad perspective of what's happening in Guyana. Brother Vincent, can we ignore America?
No. And if you recall, if you recall that when I gave my little spiel, you remember I said that there are two pillars of a democracy
Yes.
that we all cherish in the United States, and the United States is the bastion of a democracy, and the expectations are, companies such as Exxon, they're ambassadors of the United States of America, and the two pillars, of course, were to follow the rule of law and strong institutions. And Exxon is the face of America, not only in Guyana, but throughout the Caribbean. If something happens, the goodwill could be destroyed, not only in Guyana, but throughout the Caribbean, if Exxon does not follow the rule of law, which they're not doing right now. And there's a major spill that wipes out the entire economy of the entire Caribbean. So that was one of the perspective. And then you yourself, Dr. Hinds, when you give your few words, you said, well, okay, what we would like to do, you don't have to take what we're telling you, but we're inviting you to come and do a fact-finding mission.
There you go.
In addition to everything that we told them, I remember that came from you. We're inviting you to do a fact-finding mission, which they willingly agreed to do. They willingly agreed. And I think that was also a key part of it, that, you didn't say, well, okay, here are the facts, you believe it or you don't. You said, here, we're inviting you, what we're telling you here today, we believe in what we're saying, but you can come, we would like for you to come prove for yourself that it exists or it doesn't exist.
Dr. Vincent Adams there, and as Dr. Adams said, one of the big blows of this conference is that it brought us all together. You walked into that room at the conference, you had the opposition leader there, and his entourage, the leading members, Amanza Desir, Roysdale Ford, who many people see as vying for the leadership of the party. You had the general secretary there. You had a GAP leader there. The PNC, APNU had a full complement on the AFC side. You had Kathy Hughes. You had Brother Patterson. You had Vince himself. You had Ricky Ramsaroop. For good measure, Shara Duncan, the General Secretary.
That's right.
The General Secretary. Then you had the WPA in the person of myself and Kidaki Amsterdam. And we had Brother Ozea there, who many people doesn't know, is a member of the WPA. So what we had there were three political parties at the highest leadership in one
and
place.
The diaspora. On top
And then you had the diaspora.
Yeah.
Then you had the diaspora. And if I were the PPP, that would frighten the daylight out of me, because I would say, we are saying these people are not united, but there they are, all in one place, singing from one hymn book. And I think that scared the daylight out of them. Not only were there political parties there, but there were leading members of community organizations in the diaspora.
Ipadaji was there.
North American groups were there. We had a brother that came all the way from the Virgin Islands,
from South Carolina, from Florida, from all over the U.S.
All over. A sister from Texas.
Yeah.
And we were there together, not throwing stones at each other, but standing up for our country and standing up for what is right. I think it's a big victory for the opposition. Whether Brother Rickford scripted it like that or not, that is the outcome. And it's not surprising that on the first day, 273,000 people viewed that conference. 273,000 people. That's almost 1/3 of the Guyanese population that viewed that conference. Sisters and brothers, do not allow yourself to be swayed by the PPP's propaganda. We are making headway.
Before
Vince,
you end,
yes,
before, just let me add a little tidbit here. Part of the propaganda was there were only like 20 people at the conference. You and I. So, and I remember on the second day, Dr. Hines, a lot of us even had to scramble to get seats. The place was so full. So all of this stuff about 20 people, that's absolute nonsense. My understanding is that we had over 120 people who registered and attended the conference, which was outstanding, by the way.
yes,
Especially, and this was again a key point, is it was only by invitation.
by invitation.
Because a lot of people wanted to come. I know a lot of people called me and wanted to show up, but it was strictly by invitation. Hey, I guess we should have given the Mr. Jaguar, let him pay his money and come and Pope. let him come to see for himself, and then I wonder what he would have said. Maybe we might have been able to educate him.
Yes, and you're so right. Because that second day, I got there a little bit late, and Sister Dawn Cush kept a seat at your table.
That's right, exactly.
She kept a seat for me, or else I would have had to stand up.
That's right.
It was a wonderful event, and it has reaped dividends for our struggle, but it has also reaped dividends for our country. The PPP, before the 2020 election, they hid in the darkness. They spent over 400 million Guyanese dollars paying lobbyists to bring down the government of Guyana. We're not doing that. We do not believe in regime change. We believe in change of government via the proper way. We do not believe in regime change. And we said that very, very clearly. Brother Vince,
before again, every time let me touch on this data. Who needs data to see that people's homes are being bulldozed and they're left homeless in Mocha, in Linden, even in Jetty, where they want to build a shore base to remove those poor people, and even in Success. What other data do you know? What other data do you need when it's well established that 90% of the business and the money are going to one set of people? I mean, what data are they? Nobody, they're not. Have they been denying this? Everybody, we've seen it. It's been all over the news. There are photographs, there are videos on these things, so you can't hide from those videos. Some people are right at Sue's Dyke at I can't remember the Hillfoot. So these things are out there, so you can't hide and deny that these things do not exist. What other data do you need?
What other data do you need? Dr. Vincent Adams here, engineer who understands the oil and gas industry, is an expert on it, and has been putting that expertise to work, not only as head of the EPA, but now as a watchdog of the industry. And of course, there is so much to watch in the oil and gas industry, not only in our Guyana, but in other parts of the world. It's a global phenomenon. And that is what I'm saying, that, the oil and gas industry, it can make us, it can break us. It's that important. And we cannot risk one party by themselves. We cannot risk it. We opened the newspaper this morning, and one man at the oil and gas ministry is being fingered. One man. They believe we are fools. Mr. Gosai went off on his own, call up Exxon and sit down with them and reduce the expense there from $214 million US to 3 million. One man. One man. Dr. Vince, do you buy that?
Oh, I mean, you've got to be. Fool would be an understatement to buy that type of. So as a matter of fact, there's even evidence. I think even Dr. Jack, well, the Honorable Dr. Jack Dio.
They're doctors and they're doctors.
mentioned in one of his press conferences before all this thing blew up, that he and the other Barrett, the other minister, and Mr. Gosai had met and discussed this. The tour 14 going to the 11, going to the 3. So why are you now saying that you didn't know all this was going on when it's coming out now that you had discussion? You yourself said you had discussion with this man. We know how this vice president operates. Okay, it doesn't matter what happens. If he gets a bad dream, I guarantee he would blame somebody else. The guy blames everybody else. He has no leadership. A normal leader would say, "Hey, the buck stops here." This guy is the buck stops every place else. So he's going to come up with anything to blame. He's never taken responsibility for anything. Of course, he's never done anything. So, so maybe he might be expecting something that doesn't exist. But he blames everybody for everything that goes bad and comes to the point. Yeah, they've got this poor guy now. And the sad part of this here, Dr. Hines, is that this guy, he's got a choice. Is either he comes out and say what the truth is, but then he would be in jeopardy of losing his job to begin with, or he stays quiet. And I think that's what the deal is going to be. He's going to stay quiet, and they're going to hope that this is going to go away. But this here is a pattern, and it's not a one-time thing. We need to keep this on the front. This type of behavior on the front burner. This is guarantee you. This is not the first example, and it will also not be the last.
It would not be the last, and we know how our politics operate. No middle level official is going to take on a task like that.
Not under. We all know Jagdio. Okay, no, this guy is a control freak. This guy does everything. He speaks for everybody. Hell, he doesn't even allow the president to speak. He doesn't even allow Barrett, the guy who's in charge of the leadership. He never had a press conference, never answered any question. He doesn't allow Anil Nandalal. Nobody. This guy, he's an expert in everything. He controls everything. So does he expect us to really believe that that this one little guy, is responsible for making a major decision such as this, dealing with Exxon? And on top of that, Dr. Hines, I have dealt with the Exxons of the world. There is no way that these guys are going to make such a major decision or take such a direction from some low-level employee. No way they're going to do that. No way they're going to do that.
That's right. They are thinking that we are fools, but we are not. We are not fools. We're not fools. And I think somebody suggested it quite rightly that we should call him Barrett Voster. And we should call Irfan Botha. You all know Voster?
No.
Botha and Voster. Two apartheid leaders. You are so creative.
That's right.
Barrett Voster and Irfan Botha. They are so christened there by our viewers. Leaders of the Guyana apartheid regime. Barrett Voster, who think that people are so foolish. He wants data. And then when Nigel Hughes give him data, he said, we don't make decisions based on data.
But here's the other part. I'm remembering these little tidbits, and the guy, he just can't help himself when he spouts stuff. When when he was addressing Niger Use Data one night on his press conference, he said, well, you know, that's just, we've got a schedule for this thing. So it's going to be a time when we get to the black areas. He said that. There's going to be a time when we get to the black area. So he's even digging a deeper hole, which means that the black areas are a low priority. But we know that there is no priority. But the guys even admitted. Then, in another one that's stuck in my mind is that he got down there in Buzot one night when people were addressing the same situation, saying that all of the money are going to these big construction projects that are only benefiting a certain class or a certain race of people. He said, well, the only thing that the opposition can talk about is feeding poor people. He said that twice. So he can't help himself as he disclosed who he really is by these stupid comments that he makes. Well, it's sincere in his part, except that they say, you know, when they say, you know, what a sober mind conceals, a drunken mind reveals. You know, so that's what he does.
Baron Foster. Good evening to my friend Lawrence Houston, Brother Abiosi. I hadn't seen Brother Abiosi in years. I know he's a regular on the program and he's offered his comment here. A former diplomat, and we go back years in Washington, D.C., and it was good to see Brother Abiosi. They represented the Institute Against Discrimination, which has its roots in Guyana, and it has an overseas wing. Good evening to all of you. Good evening, all of you. Good evening, Winston. Good evening, Anthony. Welcome, Carol Fortune. Welcome. Look, this is a wonderful journey. It's a wonderful journey because we are doing it together. We are doing this journey together. And it's good that you all are out here every night. When this period of our history is being written, it would be about you, the ordinary people. You know, they start off by saying that, Duncan and Hines and Benchop and Kedaki, they're not influencing anybody. And then they end up saying they have a critical mass they speak to every night. And Barrett Foster told the PPP people, go on social media. All of you should go on social media. And they have all kinds of social media programs. I remember there was a man named Lightning in my village. The Buxtonians, they will know Papa Lighto, you know, and he had some relatives. They had about 7-8 houses in the yard. And, you know, he went there one day, they must have irritated him. And, you know, he said, all them houses, are you getting this yard in a makeup one? All the social media programs that they have tried with to put us down and to think in a makeup one, because it does not have the same impact of Duncan's program or Mark Benchop program or Kedaki's program in the morning. And of course, Politics 101 is in the mix there. And they are so jealous. They are so jealous because they're on air every evening. They are jealous of the following that we have, the dedicated following. And they're also jealous that we just don't talk to ourselves. We talk among ourselves. We bring you information, which is very important. Brother Vince, so tell us what's happening in the courts. You've come onto this program, you've talked about flaring, you've talked about the dangers of flaring, you are big on the environment, you are head of the EPA, so you know what you're talking about. The court made a ruling today based on a case that was brought by Sister Vanda Radzik, and I'm blanking on the other person. I know Sister Vanda used to be my sister in the WPA in the old days, so I know her very well. So her name springs by the other name. But tell us what that case was about, What was the argument before the court? How did the court rule, and what's the significance of the ruling?
Dr. Hines and all the listeners here who were interested in the welfare and the environment, safety, and health of Guyana should be very concerned about this. You know that I and many others have been, fighting for a clean environment, because we know what can happen with oil production. This ruling here was kind of puzzling, Dr. Hines, and it's really a travesty of injustice. Um, you know, and there are several things. I wish I had the entire night to go through many of the things. First of all, here is what the case was about. I'm going to give you a little bit of history. With the EPA under the coalition government wrote the first two permits, and what we put in those permits was flaring is prohibited. And by the way, flaring is when you produce gas, when you produce oil, gas comes up with the oil. For every barrel of oil that comes out of the ground, right now we're getting about 1,400 cubic feet of gas, when it expands at standard conditions on the surface. So every barrel that comes up, we're getting about 1,400 cubic feet. So it's a lot of gas. Now that gas contains over 200 toxic contaminants. You name it, it's in that gas. And of course, we know that it's a well-established fact that it caused global, this whole thing about climate change. And another thing, when it goes up into the sky, it also falls acid rain that falls back into on your belongings, equipment. It rusts your rooftops, your cars. It gets into your vegetation, your farms. It gets into your waterways, etc. So it does a lot of damage. It's no good. So what the coalition put into the permit, that flaring is prohibited. The EIA, the Environmental Impact Assessment, which is the Bible that does all the studies as to how you mitigate hazardous circumstance, the EIA says that all of that gas, which is a standard practice, by the way, must be re-injected. It must be re-injected back into the reservoir, except under three conditions. When you're starting up, which is expected, you're trying out the system for a few minutes or a few seconds, you may have some gas in the equipment. You have to burn it. The second thing is maintenance. The three conditions, except for the maintenance, startup, and the third condition was an emergency that you have no control over. If something happens, you have gas in the system, you have to burn it. And then, of course, when you're doing maintenance, you got to check out the system. There's gas in the system. So these instances are just for maybe a few seconds or a few minutes. So when Exxon came on board, Exxon had agreed, by the way, because they signed the permit. When they came on board in 2019 and started production, their equipment didn't work as designed. So the coalition said, hey, the environment is more important. You're going to have to shut down until you can fix it. They begged for 30 days, we gave them. They begged for 60 days, we gave them. And then after it wasn't fixed, we brought them down to a safe operating level to stop the flaring. That was the position we took. We held them accountable. When the coalition left office now, the administration added a clause. It added a clause in the permit to allow Exxon to flare when the flaring equipment is in disrepair, meaning that it's unlimited flaring. And I guess try to fool people, they added up this paltry fee to say, well, okay, for every ton of carbon dioxide that you flare, you're going to pay us $30 per ton. Well, when you add up the amount of money that you're paying, it's less than 5% of what they're making by not flaring. Meaning they can stop the flaring by cutting back a small portion of their production. Remember what I said, that every barrel brings up 1,400 cubic feet of gas. So if you want to cut back on, at the time it was 1,000 cubic feet. So if you want to cut back on 4 million cubic feet, which was what they were flaring, you cut back your production by 4,000 barrels per day. But they don't want to do that, because then they will be losing for about $400,000. So they're paying $12,000 in fine, but gaining 400,000. So it's an incentive for them to flare. They don't have to go and do anything to that equipment. So that was the big change that was made from the coalition permit. The judge, which was kind of bizarre, the judge said that first, there's several things that she said which didn't make any sense. One of the things she said, well, the flaring didn't show any effect caused by the flaring. Now, you got to be hiding under a rock not to be reading about climate change and everything else and all the policies globally that is being impacted or changed to stop flaring or emissions of gas. The judge, which was kind of stunning and disappointing, the judge essentially believed everything that Exxon averred, and disbelieved everything that the litigants put forward. For example, and I'm going to read this. The judge claims that the evidence proffered by the litigants was confusingly expressed and ultimately difficult to follow. Those were her words. Well, let me tell you something, Dr. Hines and the listener. The lawyer in this case was a lady by the name of Melinda Janke. There is no other person on this planet who was better positioned, and she's an attorney, by the way, an internationally renowned attorney. There's no other person on this planet who was better positioned to present the facts in this case than Melinda, because Melinda was one of the key authors of the EPA Act. So you can't tell me, and here's a lady who's an international attorney who's been highly accomplished. So you're telling me that this lady who's an expert who wrote the EPA Act, she cannot explain what is in that act. So those are some of the bizarre things. She said, here's the other thing. I mean, this has bias written all over it. There's something more than just the fact. The judge states that while EPA did not respond to the allegations about the pollution-free, listen to this now, Exxon country manager produced evidence of comparative flaring fee for other countries, including the European Union and Central America. Now, then she used that as a basis. Now, why didn't she even ask about the United States standard, which is what we adopted in the coalition? She just went and listened to what Rutledge said. She did not even ask, well, okay, what is your home country, the United States, the most powerful country that sets the standard internationally? What are their standards? She just decided to go along with what he gave her. And you know what is the United States standard, which is what we adopted? You have a maximum of 48 hours to flare at startup. 48 hours. They said it's unlimited, basically, as long as you pay that paltry fine, which means that you're paying, as long as you can afford to pollute, that's what you're doing. The other thing that was kind of bizarre, she used another basis that is something called the polluter pay principle. She shows a clear, total lack of understanding of what the polluter pay principle is. The polluter pay principle was developed in the United States since in the 70s, when we were putting together environmental regulations, and we found hundreds, if not thousands, of abandoned sites before we had regulations. So, and they couldn't find the owners of these sites and the operator. So a fund called Superfund was put into place to know where you've got to go clean up these sites. So this new program came into being where it's a fund to address the post-closure sites. It's not about, it doesn't mean the polluter pay principle does not mean that you pay to pollute. Pay to pollute doesn't make any sense. It flies in the face of environmental controls, because if you're paying to pollute, then you don't need an EPA. All you got to say, put a unit cost and amount of pollution you can put out there, and tell the folks here, if you emit so much, then this is what you're going to be paying. So a polluter pay principle does not mean you pay to pollute as much as you want as long as you can afford it. That doesn't make any sense. That's our interpretation. Then she said, of course, one of the things that they talk about data, Dr. Hines, where there's the government data of people have been asking, including myself, about tell us how much gas you've been flaring. They have not been telling anybody how much gas is flared today. The last number, which was over 2 years ago that I saw, was 16 billion. They bragged about their website. There's nothing on the website about gas and that data. They talk about data, just the data with how much gas is produced, how much water is produced, how much water you're dumping in the ocean. So that is the data that people are interested in. So for her to say that 20 plus billion cubic feet of gas does not have an impact on the environment is absolutely ridiculous. So those are the things that came out of that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, Dr. Hines. And I don't know what's the motive, but it cannot be anything that was carefully thought out, like in the Judge Kissoon's case, where you can tell that Judge Kissoon really studied. He knew the details of those issues. In this case, all that happened here, in a nutshell, is that this judge took everything, and she said it in her own words. She said it in her own words that what the litigants presented were opinions, but what Exxon presented were facts, which is blatantly false. Yes. So there's something else going on here that is just ridiculous, and it should be a major concern for all. But here again, Exxon has got the green light to exploit our God-given riches without any concern for the health, safety, and environment of our people and for future generations. That's what this decision could mean. And just another piece of information, I remember, and I say that because Exxon indicated officially that they really don't care about flaring in our environment. I remember when they came to the EPA when I was there, and we were doing the Payara permit before I left. And they had in writing that it was basically okay to flare because Guyana was a carbon sink, meaning that we were so clean that we had the capacity to absorb pollutants. While at the same time, they had made a commitment to clean up and stop polluting, cut back on their pollutants, the same flaring, by over 50% in the rest of the world. So they want to pollute our environment while they're cleaning up the rest of the world. I mean, if that is not bypass and disrespect and just uncaring for people like ourselves, I don't know what else is. And so Exxon again has been given it, by the way, in conspiracy with the government, because EPA was part of this of this lawsuit too. Yeah, like in all the other lawsuits. I mean, it's unheard of that such a thing would happen. You expect that the number one mission of any government is to represent its people. They're doing the complete opposite when it comes to this oil and gas industry.
Well, a setback for our environment, but as we keep saying on this program and other programs, this is big, and we ought to pay careful attention. Oil and gas can break us or make us, and we have a choice That's why it's obviously that we want oil and gas to make us, not to break us. And when we look at the ruling of the court here, this is really a blow to the environment of our country. We've got to keep on it. We've got to keep on it. There is enough of us to fight all the fights that need to be fought around this question of oil and gas.
But you know the other thing,
Yes.
too, Dr. Hines, you see, and that you see the challenge with with the environment, why people do not pay attention to it. It's not something that you can see or feel or touch. You know, with oil, you produce oil, you get money, you can touch and see. The environment is something out there, and it takes a while unless there's a disaster such as a spill. And let me warn folks, I've been part in the U.S. government when we had incidents of major proportion that we had to deal with. But when something happens, that's the time that everybody realizes how important the environment is. And I'm telling you, if we have a spill in Guyana, and Exxon is being so negligent in their operations and unsafe in their operations. For example, Exxon is producing above the safe operating limit by something like over 30% above their safe operating limit, which is one of the things that I mentioned to the congressional folks. So they're doing things to enhance the possibility of a spill. And then if you have a spill, all the billions that you hear about would be wiped out because Exxon has already decided in the other court case that they do not want to commit to cleaning up, to spending the money to clean up after a spill. So we would be left in a lurch, bankrupt, obviously, because a spill, the one in the Macondo spill in the Gulf costs $145 billion US dollars. Our entire national budget is what, about $3 billion. Exxon does not want to sign up for anything above $2 billion. Now, what the hell is that going to clean up? So if we have a spill, and it's not only going to wipe us out, it's going to wipe out the entire Caribbean, the economy of tourism, fishing, everything. We are already seeing the effects of fishing. And Dr. Hines, you mentioned Venezuela. Well, here's a scary thought for all of us. If you want to give Venezuela an excuse, you have a spill and you wash away Venezuela's coast, that would be an easy reason for them to because that's where the spill plume in the models show it would be going, along Venezuela, Trinidad. So if you want to have an excuse, that's where it would be going. And just to touch on what you're saying, oil could either make or break us. And we've seen the countries where it has really broken us. Venezuela, our neighbor. Yes. Do you know that people know that our neighbor Venezuela has the highest reserves of petroleum in the world?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, Venezuela's reserve is 304 billion barrels of oil. We're talking ours. Guess what ours is that we're so elated and giddy about? 11 billion. Close to 30 times our reserve. That's what Venezuela has. 304 billion barrels of oil. The highest reserve. And look where Venezuela is today. Look where they are. We've got Venezuelans tripping over each other to come over to Guyana. With 304 billion barrels sitting there. We have 11 billion. They're coming to our country. So like you said, you rightly said, our biggest fear should be, and we're seeing it already, the mismanagement of this industry. The mismanagement and corruption and everything that is involved in it. There's no planning whatsoever. And that's the biggest fear. That this, with all of the oil and everything, it might turn out to be nothing. We all are hoping and praying because we all need to benefit. Guyana needs it. We need to benefit from it. But it's not encouraging for what we're seeing. Now, before I leave, there's another thing that happened. When I was looking at this case, I decided to go back and check for some information, and I could not believe my eyes what I saw last night. Dr. Hines the other folk. Before I left, we, meaning the coalition, had drafted the Payara permit. And in that Payara permit, they went ahead, they were so hurried that they signed the permit a few weeks after I left with everything that we had in the permit. Well, here are some of the guardrails that we had in the permit, Dr. Hines. You know that in addition, when a barrel of oil comes up, it brings up water, toxic water with radioactivity, lead and mercury and all kinds of stuff with oil. They're dumping that in the ocean. When again, the international standards, the World Bank standard calls from re-injecting it back into the reservoir. When I worked in the oil industry as a senior petroleum engineer, that was a no-brainer that, it was understood. You had to re-inject it back into the reservoir. They're dumping it into the ocean. And of course, it goes with oil because you cannot clean up all the oil. And I made some quick calculation. Over the life of the field, 20 years or so, we would have dumped in the concentration of oil that is allowed in that water that they're dumping, the small concentration for every million barrels of water that we dump, in those million barrels, we're dumping also about 30 to 40 barrels of oil, which means over the life of the field, we will have dumped between 200 and 300,000 barrels of pure oil just by dumping that water there when we should be injecting. The water is 3 times as hot as the ocean water. It's full of we've got radioactive material and all kinds of toxic metal. We had in the Payara permit that we put together that the water must be re-injected. We also had, and I hear the vice president bragging about this capping stock. After the Macondo spill, there was invented this heavy piece of equipment. If a well blows out, it's heavy. It's about 50 to 100 tons. You just put it on top of the cap, and to stop the blow, to stop the well from flowing. Well, that means that the quicker you can get that capping stock to the site, the better. Myself and Dr. Bino, who was heading the oil agency, we got Exxon to agree to 5 days to get it there, to source to be stations at the south of Trinidad, to get it to the FPSO, the ships within 5 days. And then we told them in the Payara permit that they have to come back and show us why they cannot get it there within 3 days to stop whatever spill there will be. You know what they've done? They've removed all of that. They removed the dumping of the water that we had in there. The stopping of the dumping of the water. And then they've tripled the time that Exxon has to get that capping stock to the site if there is a blow. They've tripled it from 3 days to 9 days. So you can have an extra 6 days of just, who knows, 100,000 barrels per day being spilled into the ocean. It doesn't matter. But the key is that there's every single move that they make, every single one of these that saves Exxon money. And Exxon had already agreed to all this. On top of that, you remember I talked about the flaring? In that permit also, we told them that you cannot flare for more than 48 hours at startup at any time. And that was the United States standard, by the way. They've increased it to 60 days, but the 60 days doesn't matter because they can continue after 60. The only thing they've got to do is get permission from the EPA to continue after 60 days. And anything after 60 days, they've got to pay this paltry fine, and then they can flare as much as they want. So those are the problems. So they basically got a 60-day free flaring. A 60 day. So they've got to, but anything above that, they've got to pay this paltry fee. But while they're flaring, they're making money in lieu of not flaring. They're making 30 times the amount of money. So those are the kinds of things. So they've removed, and they've done it secretly. They modified that permit secretly. I only saw it last night, realized that they had done it. The normal process that you must follow is that you put it into the newspapers in a page, saying, we're going to be modifying the permit and these are the changes that we're making? Are there comments? Is there none of that? They secretly went ahead and modified that permit on the 30th of June of this year. Those permits should not be touched unless something happens, unless 5 years expire. That permit was not going to expire until 2025 September when it was signed. They went ahead secretly and did this behind everybody's back. And if I wasn't researching, going looking for information in this case, I wouldn't have even known
that. Yes, Dr. Vincent Adams here, bringing to us very valuable information. The big thing here is Exxon will do what Exxon has done across the world, and it is the duty of the government, our elected representative. That government is there to represent Guyanese. We are a co-investor. Guyana is a co-investor in the oil industry. We're not there to defend Exxon and to facilitate Exxon. We are a co-investor, and our government is failing us. Dr. Vincent Adams, as usual, always a pleasure to talk with you.
Same here.
To bring light where there is a lot of darkness, and some of that darkness is willful darkness. See you next week.
Definitely, Dr. Hines, and nice chatting with our listeners, and I look forward to it again next week.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vincent Adams there, doing what he knows how to do and bringing to bear an expertise, bringing to bear important information on the oil and gas industry. And our focus on this program is, of course, empowering our people. That's a very important aspect of democracy and informed citizenry. And where the government is refusing to inform us, then we have got to pick up that slack. And that is why we have people like Dr. Vincent Adams. As old people say, we send you all to school, not to go and play around, but to come back to your family, come back to your community, and lift your family, your community, and your country. I'm going to see you all. Today's Friday. So I'll see you guys again on Monday, unless something happens over the weekend and I go live. I'd like to thank all of you. Somebody joined us from Region 7. It's good to know that we have people out there in Bartica and the environ. Somebody joined us from Region 9. Good evening to you all out there in Region 7, Region 9, Region 8. It's good that you're able to join us. Perfect Harmony was in the house tonight. Then Amstel was in the house. Number 51, 52, 53, Quarantine in the house. And of course, those of you in the diaspora, it's always our pleasure bringing us together so that we can, together, because that's the motto, bringing us together so we can fight this little struggle, to get over this little trouble, as Brother Bob Marley says in that famous song, Zimbabwe. We got to get together to fight this little struggle, to overcome this little trouble. And we have overcome in the past, and we are continuing to overcome. We overcame last week in Washington, D.C., when we went there with our case. And we spoke to the world. We spoke to the world. And as we said 2 nights ago, they didn't want us to talk to the Black Caucus. You see, one of the reasons is that the Black Caucus, more than any other section of U.S. government, understands our language. When we told them about bulldozing the homes that Dr. Vincent Adams spoke about earlier tonight, they understand that. They understand extrajudicial killing. They understand Exxon taking advantage of communities, because a lot of our people down there in Texas and Mississippi and so forth have to live with the threat of oil. Houston, So they understand our language, they understand our pain. And that is why they didn't want us to talk to the Black Caucus. And as Brother Jeffrey said in the meeting that we were in, there is a reason that the Congressional Black Caucus is not named the Congressional African American Caucus. It's called the Congressional Black Caucus, a Pan-African, a global approach. And in this instance, black means in our Caribbean, all of us, East Indians, Amerindians, Africans, from the standpoint of race, we are all black. Indian is not a race. Indian is a culture. Amerindian is not a race. Amerindian is a culture. Race is black and white. Blackness and whiteness. And in this case, all of us in Guyana fall under the construct of blackness. And so therefore, when we took our case to the Black Caucus, it's a universal case that we took there. We talked to the Black Caucus about what's happening in the Amerindian community. We talked to them about what's happening with labor, where the president, Irfan Botha, went over the head of the union and trying to get teachers to substitute allowance for salary. They're two different things. We want more allowance to the teachers, but not in lieu of salaries. And those of you teachers who are on this program, tell your colleagues, don't cut their nose. Fight for allowance, but not in lieu of salary. It's like you're going to work in a man's yard and he get guinea for the tree. And he gives you guinea in lieu of payment. Don't be fooled. Irfan Botha and Bharat Voster, they're heading an apartheid regime. And that's what their interest is. And we are anti-apartheid people. All of us. African, Indian, Amerindian, Chinese, Portuguese, we are mixed people. We are all anti-apartheid people. No collusion with apartheid. No collusion. We already have oil apartheid. We hear about the Guyanese workers and how they're treated on the rigs. And oil itself could lead to apartheid. So we have our work cut out. Take a break on the weekend, have a little talks, but keep your eyes on the prize. Keep your eyes on the prize. Good night, and see you all next Monday or on the weekend if something compels us to come on here.